before the sky changed forever. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky with wonder. The stars appeared in the same places. The moon quietly changed its shape each month. The sun rose every morning and disappeared every evening. The heavens seemed perfect, peaceful, unchanging. Most people believed that Earth stood at the center of the universe. Everything else, they thought, moved around it. Few dared to question that idea. After all, it had been accepted for generations. But sometimes, the greatest discoveries begin when someone looks at something familiar in a completely different way. In a city called Pisa, Italy, a curious young boy loved asking questions. He wanted to know why objects moved, why music followed patterns, why nature obeyed invisible rules. He was not satisfied with easy answers. He wanted to see the truth for himself. Years later, he would point a simple telescope toward the night sky. What he saw would surprise him. It would challenge old beliefs. It would change science forever. His name was Galileo Galilei, and his remarkable journey began with a child who never stopped asking why. A curious boy in Pisa, Galileo Galilei was born on February 15, 1564, in the Italian city of Pisa. Italy was not one united country then. Instead, it was made up of many independent cities, each with its own traditions and rulers. Galileo grew up in a family that valued learning. His father, Vincenzo Galilei, was a talented musician, but he was also a careful thinker. He often questioned ideas that people accepted without proof. Young Galileo watched his father test musical strings, compare sounds, and search for better explanations. Without realizing it, he was learning an important lesson. Do not believe something simply because everyone else believes it. Look for evidence. As a child, Galileo enjoyed exploring the world around him. He watched water flow through narrow streets after the rain. He noticed birds soaring above the city walls. He observed shadows growing longer as the sun crossed the sky. Small details fascinated him. Every ordinary moment seemed to hide another question. His teachers quickly noticed his intelligence. He learned mathematics with surprising ease. He also loved drawing and studying mechanical objects. To Galileo, the world felt like a giant puzzle waiting to be solved. Although he could not yet imagine his future, one habit was already becoming part of who he was. He trusted careful observation more than quick conclusions. That simple habit would one day lead him to challenge ideas that had stood for nearly 2,000 years. Numbers tell a different story. As Galileo grew older, his father hoped he would become a doctor. Medicine offered respect and financial security, so Galileo entered the University of Pisa to study medicine. At first, he tried to follow the path his family had planned. He attended lectures, he read medical books, he listened carefully to his professors. But something was missing. His attention often wandered toward mathematics. Numbers fascinated him in a way medicine never could. One day, while sitting inside a cathedral, Galileo noticed a large lamp hanging from the ceiling. The lamp gently swung back and forth after someone had moved it. He watched its motion again and again. The swings became smaller, yet each movement seemed to take almost the same amount of time. Most people would have ignored such a simple sight. Galileo could not. He counted the rhythm using his own heartbeat. The more he observed, the more curious he became. Could motion follow mathematical rules? Could nature be measured instead of merely described? That simple observation changed everything. Galileo gradually left medicine behind and devoted himself to mathematics and natural philosophy, the study of how the universe works. His father worried about the decision. Mathematics offered fewer opportunities than medicine. But Galileo believed he had found the work he was meant to do. He had discovered something more valuable than a profession. He had discovered a way of asking questions. Soon, those questions would lead him to experiments that challenged ideas people had accepted for centuries. Watching things fall after leaving the University of Pisa, Galileo devoted himself to mathematics and the study of motion. He wanted to understand how objects moved. Many scholars still followed the teachings of the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. According to those ideas, heavier objects should fall faster than lighter ones. Most people accepted this without question. Galileo was not satisfied. He believed that nature should be tested, not simply trusted. Instead of repeating old ideas, he began performing experiments of his own. He rolled wooden balls down smooth slopes. He measured how far they traveled. He repeated the same experiment again and again, changing only one detail at a time. Each test revealed something new. Legend says that Galileo even dropped objects from the famous Leaning Tower of Pisa. Whether the story happened exactly that way or not, it reflects the kind of scientist he had become. He believed that answers came from careful observation, not from tradition, not from reputation, only from evidence. The more he experimented, the more he realized that mathematics could describe the movement of nature with remarkable accuracy. Motion was not random. It followed patterns. Invisible rules governed the world around us. Galileo carefully wrote down everything he discovered. He knew that every experiment was another step toward understanding the universe. Yet the greatest test of his curiosity had not happened on Earth. It was waiting above him, hidden among the stars. A telescope turned toward heaven. In 1609, Galileo heard about a remarkable invention from the Netherlands. It was a simple telescope. The instrument could make distant objects appear much closer. Galileo had never seen one, but after hearing how it worked, he decided to build his own. Working day after day, he carefully shaped lenses and adjusted their positions. Each new version became a little better than the last. Soon, his telescope could magnify distant objects many times more than the human eye. Most people use telescopes to look across land or sea. Galileo had a different idea. One clear evening, he pointed his telescope toward the sky. The moon no longer looked smooth and perfect. Instead, he saw mountains, valleys, shadows. Its surface looked surprisingly similar to the Earth. Then he turned the telescope toward the Milky Way. What had once appeared as a soft band of light suddenly became countless individual stars. The universe was far larger than anyone had imagined. Night after night, Galileo continued observing. Every evening revealed another surprise. The heavens were not simple. They were rich with details that had remained invisible for thousands of years. The telescope had not changed the sky. It had changed the way people could see it. Soon, Galileo would discover something even more astonishing. Something that would challenge one of the oldest beliefs about the universe. 4 small lights. One cold evening in January 1610, Galileo pointed his telescope toward the planet Jupiter. At first, he noticed 3 tiny points of light nearby. They looked like ordinary stars. The next night, they had moved. Galileo was puzzled. Stars were not supposed to change their positions so quickly. He continued watching. Night after night, the tiny lights shifted again. Sometimes there were 3, sometimes 4. Carefully, Galileo recorded every observation in his notebook. Slowly, the answer became clear. The small lights were not distant stars at all. They were moons. They were traveling around Jupiter. This discovery was extraordinary. For centuries, many people believed that everything in the heavens revolved around the Earth. Yet here was clear evidence that some objects circled another planet. Galileo had found 4 of Jupiter's largest moons. Today, they are known as Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. To Galileo, they represented far more than new worlds. They showed that the universe was more complex than people had imagined. The old picture of the heavens no longer seemed complete. If moons could orbit Jupiter, what else might be possible? Galileo's telescope continued revealing new wonders, but each discovery also brought new questions, and not everyone welcomed the answers he was beginning to find. The sun at the center. As Galileo continued observing the sky, he noticed something else that caught his attention. The planet Venus changed its shape, much like the moon. Sometimes it appeared as a thin crescent. At other times, it looked almost full. Galileo carefully recorded each phase. Then he compared his observations with the ideas people believed about the universe. According to the traditional view, Earth stood at the center, and every planet moved around it. But the changing shapes of Venus did not fit that picture. They made much more sense if Venus was traveling around the sun. Galileo remembered the work of another astronomer, Nicolaus Copernicus. Years earlier, Copernicus had suggested that the sun, not Earth, stood at the center of the planetary system. His idea had attracted attention, but very little direct evidence existed. Now, Galileo believed he was seeing that evidence with his own eyes. The telescope had revealed something that words alone never could. Nature itself seemed to be speaking. Galileo did not accept the new idea because it was different. He accepted it because the observations pointed in that direction. To him, evidence mattered more than tradition. He wrote about his discoveries and shared them with other scholars across Europe. Many scientists became fascinated. Others remained doubtful. The more Galileo explained what he had seen, the more people began discussing the true structure of the heavens. His discoveries were changing astronomy, but they were also drawing the attention of powerful people who viewed these new ideas with great concern. When questions became dangerous, as Galileo's discoveries spread across Europe, excitement grew among many scientists. His telescope had revealed mountains on the moon, moons around Jupiter, the changing phases of Venus. Each observation encouraged people to look at the heavens in a new way. But not everyone welcomed these discoveries. Some scholars believed Galileo's ideas challenged long-held teachings about the universe. Others worried that such changes might confuse people or weaken traditions that had guided society for generations. Galileo understood that his observations raised difficult questions. Still, he believed that truth should never be feared. If nature revealed something new, people should study it with open minds. In 1632, Galileo published a book comparing different ideas about the universe. Although written as a conversation between several characters, many readers recognized that Galileo strongly supported the sun-centered view. The book quickly attracted attention. Soon afterward, Galileo was called to Rome. There, he appeared before the Roman Inquisition. The discussions were serious and respectful, but the outcome was difficult. Galileo was instructed not to publicly defend the idea that Earth moved around the sun. To avoid harsher punishment, he accepted the court's decision. Many people later remembered this moment as a conflict between new discoveries and long-standing beliefs. For Galileo, it was a painful experience. Yet even when his voice became quieter, his observations could not be erased. The stars remained exactly where they had always been, waiting for future generations to look again. A window still open. After the trial, Galileo returned to his home near Florence. He was no longer free to travel as he once had. Much of the rest of his life was spent under house arrest. To many people, it might have seemed like the end of his work. For Galileo, it was not. Although he could no longer speak openly about certain ideas, he continued thinking, writing, and experimenting. His attention returned to the motion of falling objects and the mathematics behind movement. He carefully studied how speed changed over time. He explored ideas that later became the foundation of modern physics. His final book, Two New Sciences, brought together years of research on motion and mechanics. Because publishing it in Italy was impossible, the manuscript was printed in another country and quietly reached readers across Europe. Even as his eyesight slowly failed, Galileo never stopped asking questions. The telescope had first opened a window to the heavens. Now his writings were opening windows inside, the minds of young scientists. Among those readers was a young English student who would one day build upon Galileo's work. His name was Isaac Newton. The questions Galileo had begun asking were not finished. In many ways, they were only just beginning. A light that could not be hidden. The years passed quietly. Galileo remained at his home near Florence, surrounded by notebooks, instruments, and unfinished ideas. His world had become much smaller, yet his curiosity had not. Although his movements were limited, his mind continued to travel far beyond the walls of his house. Friends and former students visited him whenever they could. They discussed mathematics, astronomy, motion, and the questions that still filled the universe. Galileo listened carefully. He encouraged younger thinkers to observe nature for themselves, never to accept an idea simply because it was old, never to reject an idea simply because it was new. His eyesight slowly grew weaker. The man who had revealed so much of the night sky could no longer see the stars as he once had. Eventually, he became completely blind. For many people, such a loss would have marked the end of discovery. For Galileo, it became another challenge to face with quiet determination. He continued thinking through problems in his mind. He dictated letters. He refined his ideas. His greatest instrument had never been the telescope alone. It was the habit of asking careful questions. On January 8, 1642, Galileo Galilei passed away at the age of 77. His remarkable life had come to an end, but his work had already begun a journey of its own. His books continued traveling across Europe. His experiments inspired new generations, and among those who would learn from his ideas was a young mathematician whose discoveries would reach even farther into the universe. The man who taught the world to look again today, Galileo Galilei, is remembered as one of the founders of modern science. Not because he owned the most powerful telescope, not because he won every argument, and not because every idea he proposed remained unchanged. He is remembered because he transformed the way people searched for truth. Before Galileo, many questions were answered by tradition alone. Galileo believed that nature itself should have a voice. He encouraged people to observe carefully, to measure precisely, to test ideas through evidence. His approach became one of the foundations of the scientific method that researchers still use today. Generations of scientists followed the path he helped create. Isaac Newton built upon Galileo's studies of motion. Centuries later, Albert Einstein admired Galileo's willingness to question accepted ideas. Every new telescope sent into space continues the journey that began when Galileo lifted a small instrument toward the night sky. Perhaps the most remarkable part of his story is how ordinary it began. A curious boy watched shadows move across the ground. A university student counted the swing of a hanging lamp. A patient craftsman polished pieces of glass until they revealed a clearer view of the heavens. Step by step, observation became understanding. Understanding became discovery. And discovery changed the world. Galileo never moved the stars. He simply helped humanity see them more clearly. His greatest lesson was never about planets or telescopes alone. It was about the courage to look again, especially when everyone else believes there is nothing new to see.